Hello traders, so as you can see from the title, in this video we're going to be speaking about prop firm risk management. How I manage my risk on a challenge account. It differs from my personal trading account and it also differs from the funded account experience. So I'm obviously going to go through that in this video. So as you can see here, prop firm risk management, and when I say risk management for a prop firm, you can obviously use this on your normal accounts, but prop firms obviously have specific rules that you have to stick to. So I've kind of created a plan to kind of find out, okay, how much can I risk? Do I ever have to reduce my risk? How do I manage the drawdown requirements? So basically, how can I have the highest percentage chance of passing as physically possible? Obviously, there are things that relate to your strategy that, okay, if I improve my strategy and I improve my win rate, obviously I can then improve the percentage of times that I will actually pass the challenge. But with your strategy at the moment and with my strategy, this is kind of the best way I found for myself. And I've passed many challenges with probably most firms in the industry. I'll put up on the screen all the challenge pass certificates so you guys can see. Very selective with the firms I actually trade with now. But before I used to trade with pretty much every firm that was of a decent size, because prop firms in 2022 were very reliable. And, you know, coming in from 2021 too, they were fairly reliable. It was quite good that I knew that if I was putting my money with a firm that I would actually get paid out. Less so now. So that's why you have to be more selective with where you're putting your money, because a lot of them end up just not paying people. So that's definitely something you have to consider as part of your risk management. And when I say part of your risk management, I mean, if you're putting money, let's say $500 towards a new firm that hasn't got that proven track record, that's you not managing your risk very well. Because I see prop firms as a business. If you pay $2,000 on challenges and then you make $5,000 in payouts, you're obviously making $3,000. And then your risk is $2,000 versus $5,000. So you're risking $2,000 to make $5,000. So if your risk management isn't great on the business side of things, and you're paying $5,000 or $6,000 to make $5,000, then you're not managing it correctly. And that's where risk outside of the actual trading also comes into play. And if you're looking to learn exactly how I trade and how I've passed all these challenges and got all these payouts, there's a link to my mentorship down below. And the people in the mentorship are absolutely killing it. They're all passing prop firm challenges. They're all getting payouts. Here are payouts from the last few weeks from members in the group. If you want to join, don't miss out. I'll catch you guys in there very, very soon. So with that out the way, we are going to get into the content. So I do have a little diagram here and I'm going to go through each individual point. So we're going to start very, very simply with prop firm rules. And this is something that people kind of neglect to a certain extent. You obviously have to read through all of the rules to know what you can and can't do, but we're going to focus on two rules, and those are daily drawdown and max drawdown. We're going to start with daily drawdown because this is one where I think it's more important than people realize. So daily drawdown on an average prop firm, we're going to use average stats for this video. It's usually 5% daily drawdown and 10% max overall drawdown. So in one day, the max you can have in drawdown on usually equity is minus 5%. So on a 100K account, you can lose $5,000 or up to $5,000. But overall, it is $10,000. So the point here, never hit daily drawdown. This is something that is very, very important. And the whole risk management plan is out the window if you are someone who hits daily drawdown. This is something that I used to do back in early 2022 probably. I would try and make it all in one trade, risk 5%. And if that trade doesn't work out, then I've lost the account and I have to restart. But what I realized that I was being very, very stupid. Because if I'm hitting that 5%, not even risking 4.5%, risking 5%, people do this quite a lot. They often hit daily drawdown. But if I'm losing 5% in one day, and then I pass the next day risking 5%, why couldn't I have risked 3 or 4%, kept the account so I don't lose the challenge fee, but then the next day I can still just risk that 3 or 4% again. And let's say you lose 2 days in a row on 3%, you're only minus 6% out of your 10% max drawdown. So you could technically do it again and still only be minus 9%, if you see what I'm saying. So hitting daily drawdown should never, ever happen. If you're doing that, you're throwing away 5% drawdown. If you're only using 5% of your 10% allowed drawdown by trying to pass in one day, then you're just being stupid. Like, I'm not saying that you need to perfect your mindset. No, you are literally being stupid by not using the 5% drawdown, the extra 5% from the max drawdown. Make sure you never ever hit the daily drawdown unless something completely out of your control happens. Maybe the platform freezes, your stop loss doesn't actually, honor the price you set it at, or you have crazy slippage. But again, these are things you should be considering when you are entering trades and choosing a risk. But that's what we'll go on to in a minute. A point relating to the daily drawdown is you can utilize this to scale. I have an opinion that most people don't agree with prop firms, but I think that prop firms limiting your risk per trade is very, very stupid, and it kind of stops really, really good traders from passing quick and getting onto the funded account, which is obviously their goal. They don't want you to get onto the funded accounts. They don't want you to get huge payouts or even multiple payouts. So they try and limit what you can actually make. And having a daily drawdown of 5%, only allowing you to risk 1% per trade, or max, let's say 1.5%, it does limit you quite a lot. Because if you're risking 1% max per trade, you then have to return 10% for every 1% you're risking, obviously. Whereas if you are risking 3% per trade, I'm not advising you to risk 3% per trade, obviously, this is just an example, then you only have to make, 3.5% to pass comfortably anyway. So to make 3.5% is very easy compared to making 10%. As you guys know, if you make 10% per month consistently, you are making tens of millions in a matter of 5 to 10 years. So that's kind of why I think making 10% to just pass a challenge is quite hard for some people. But I utilize it to scale. So I have a position of 1% risk, and I will scale into this position as soon as possible. If I'm right on that trade, and I know from my data that this is what happens when I am right in a trade, it doesn't hover around my entry for 3 hours before then going to stop loss, or I want to see a perfect setup. And if I don't see that perfect setup, I won't enter. And if you should know the stats for a perfect setup. How long does this trade usually take to win? How long does this trade stick around my entry or go into drawdown for before hitting stop loss? And if you know these things, you can kind of pinpoint which setups you take on a challenge. So an A+ setup, it will give me a chance very, very quickly to either move my stop loss so that the risk is minimized. When I'm scaling in, oftentimes I will make the initial entry risk-free. And then the scale in is obviously having that 1% risk. So overall, you're still risking 1%, but then you're also, making double. And I also had that previous scaling plan where I'd scale in drawdown and kind of use the allowed drawdown of obviously more than 1% on a lot of these firms. I could risk 2% on the first position. So let me show you a little example here. So let's say price is like this and I'm selling here. So the first position, if we just change the color of this, the first position, 2% risk on this first position here. So then we have price go into drawdown, but my stop loss is up here. So price goes into drawdown, and then I enter another position here that has the same lot size, but it's obviously only risking, let's say 2.5 pips. So now I'm risking 2.25% total. Apologies if you can't read that. I am trying to do this on a mouse. It's not ideal. So now the total risk for this trade is actually 2.25%. But if this trade does win and drops all the way down to take profit, instead of making 3%, I'm now making 6, but not just 6%, I'm making 6.75%. So by adding a 0.25% risk, and obviously if I'm only allowed to risk 1% per position, I can't do this. But because I'm allowed to risk and not just lose one trade, I'm utilizing the drawdown, the daily drawdown allowed of 5%, to maximize my profits. So I'm adding more risk to the positions, although it's not a lot. I'm not risking an extra 3% in drawdown. I'm adding an extra 0.25%, but with the same stop loss size. So if that drops that 30 pips, or then will be 37.5 pips. So we'll add to the profit basically. So we'll get rid of this here. Very simple explanation there. But I'm kind of the person that believes using the drawdown you actually have is very important. Because if you're not utilizing it, then why even have it in the first place? If you don't want to utilize the kind of rules that you have, just go in with 0.1% risk and take years to pass. You know, the rules are there for a reason. If they're capping you at 5%, just don't go above that 5%. But you can go up to 4%. So that's kind of the way I see it. And obviously we have the max drawdown, which, you know, as someone who trades the way I trade with high risk, this is the only one I'll actually hit. So let's say I do this scaling and I risk 2.25% or 2.5% risk per trade. 4 trades and it's done. Can I lose 4 trades in a row? Yes. Does it happen? Yes. Do I lose accounts? Obviously. I'm not going to pass every single prop firm challenge. If that was the case, then I'd just go in for max funding, you know, millions and millions of dollars in challenges, which obviously I haven't done. And you often see people say, oh, I have this 90% win rate, or I pass every challenge. If they did pass every challenge, they would be having millions in funding and they wouldn't even have to, you know, even try basically to pass. It's so easy for them. And that's why I think max drawdown is the only one that's acceptable to actually hit. And even if you hit this max drawdown, you can still be profitable. So let's say you have 10 100k challenges. Let's go C for challenges. That cost equals around, you know, let's say $500 per account, around 5k. So let's say these are completely blown. You've blown these accounts from hitting max drawdown. That means that you are in the negative, you know, 10% per one. You are down 50%. So 50%, but also down 5k. Like that. But then let's say on that 11th one, so 1 times 100k challenge passed, you make 5%. So on that 5%, you're obviously making $5,000. And you obviously get the refund, so we're not going to count that. You know, the money's 500 spent on the challenge, but you get the 500 back, so that's basically neutral. But what percentage profit have you had to make to pass and get 5% profit? Well, that's quite simple. So if we just change the color to a blue, you're obviously minus 50% plus, you know, 10% from phase 1, the 5% from phase 2, and then the 5% profit plus 20% equals, as we know, minus 30%. So if you are a losing trader, you can lose 30% profit. So you could be a negative trader, minus 30% if it was on a personal account, but be break even. And let's say you make 10% profit, you're then minus 25%, but you've made $5,000 just by hitting the max daily drawdown of 10% each time. And, you know, on your 11th try, you pass, you can still make profit being minus 30% or minus 25%. So that is something that I feel like people don't really realize. And it's something that kind of people that say, oh, I trade prop firms profitably, they can also be negative traders or losing traders, and also the same way the other way around. So profitable traders in their personal accounts can also be losing prop firm traders. So we're going to go and dive deeper into the max drawdown now. Firstly, as it says here, calculate your worst case scenario. This point is something which people heavily neglect. So I need to look at my data. This is a simple way to actually find this out. Okay, so I have 3 or 4 years of data. Perfect. You've done my back testing. I've done videos on back testing. You can check it out. I do it also in my mentorship, full month back testing sessions. You can go and check it out there too. But I can see that my worst case scenario, my max drawdown or max consecutive losing trades was, let's say for example, 12 trades. So my losing worst case scenario, 12. So minus 12%. But we also know that the max drawdown, so MDD, or MD even because it's not daily drawdown, equals 10%. So worst case scenario, I will lose on this challenge if I actually take 1% risk in hopes of obviously passing, but then that worst case scenario could happen. So you kind of need to think, do I want to trade and not ever fail a challenge? Or do I want to go into a challenge and think, okay, there is a chance I could actually lose this, but it's okay because I have the capital behind me. So there's two different types of traders. One type of trader that can afford to lose a couple challenges and then their payout kind of makes it okay. But there's also another type of trader that doesn't have a lot of capital, that kind of needs to pass. And if you need to pass, you need to prepare for the worst. If you don't prepare for the worst case scenario, you will probably lose the account. So with this 12% risk, or this 12% max drawdown, I can't risk 1% if I'm preparing for the worst case scenario. I will have to lower my risk. So let's say I'm risking 0.75% per trade. Worst case scenario then, I will lose 9%. Minus 9% is 75% of 12. So that will be better. Worst case scenario, I will then be okay and not hit the overall drawdown. But that's not the easiest way to do it, because like I said down here, you need to calculate risk based on your worst case scenario, but you also have to take into account spread and commission. So your spread obviously isn't great on prop firms because they don't want you to pass, and commission is relatively high, especially if you are trading with CFDs, a CFD prop firm, their commission is going to be high. I have certain challenge accounts where I'm losing 1 or 2% over a month just on commissions and spread. And let's say I'm losing 1% per month on spread, then making that 0.75% risk switch from 1% obviously brings it down to 9%. Then because of that 1% extra, you can't control your spread, commission, or slippage. So cutting it down to 9% can also be quite close. And do you want to have that chance that things out of my control can actually make me lose this? No. So then you could maybe reduce it to 0.6% risk per trade, just to be sure. Again, that gives you a higher chance of actually not blowing the account. Obviously, I don't know what your profit's like. If your profit is very, very low still, you could potentially still lose the account, because let's say you go 9% in drawdown, you then make 5% before then hitting another drawdown, you could then lose the account. But our main goal is to not hit the drawdown, obviously. So you won't have to reduce size in drawdown if you actually know how many trades you can lose in a row. So when I go into a normal challenge, let's say I'm risking 1%, let's say I lose 5 trades in a row max, I know that I can comfortably risk 1.5% risk. And if I know going into it that, okay, I don't really care if this fails because I can just pass another one, I'll go in with 2.5% risk. Although 2.5% risk does give me a disadvantage based on the potential worst case scenario, it does also mean that I can pass quicker. So that's something you also have to consider too. And also, if you are losing less accounts because you are preparing for the worst case scenario, you'll lose less money on blown accounts. So when we go all the way over here, if you are preparing and not losing that 50% from that worst case scenario because you've tried to scale up to 3% risk, 4% risk, you've then lost 10 trades in a row, you're obviously down 40, 50% overall, like this, you've lost 10 accounts in a row. If you then scale it back, you can save on this 5k, so that when you actually make that 15 or 20% to pass and make 5% profit, you're actually making so much more because you're not spending 5k on challenges. So that less money on blown accounts actually makes it easier for us because we have to make less percent to win. If you're not losing 50% to actually then pass, if you're only losing 5%, 10% before then eventually passing, you can make so much more money. So this is kind of the way I look at it, and most traders don't. Never hit the max daily drawdown, utilize the daily drawdown to scale in. If they're allowing you to scale into positions and not having a fixed, risk per trade idea or symbol, then utilize this, because you'd be stupid not to. Calculate the worst case scenario and prepare for it. Some traders will see that as bad, but as a conservative approach, that is the best for most traders watching this video. If you're watching this video, you might not be in a position like myself where you can put in 5k on challenges and have them fail, because I see it as a business. Some people see it as their last hope in trading or their kind of route to trading success. But if you're seeing it as a business and you're seeing it as kind of a numbers game, then you can risk more and not go in the worst case scenario. But this is kind of probably the best approach for the many people watching this video. And obviously it saves you money, a lot of money, if you blow fewer accounts, which is obviously the goal. If you use this to calculate your risk, you're going in with an advantage that most people, probably 90% of people, don't actually have when they're going into prop firms. They've done some back testing, they want to risk 2%, and they think, okay, if I hit a winning streak now, I can pass in one or two trades, but they don't consider the downside. They don't consider what could happen if I now lose 7 trades in a row. If you're risking 2%, the account's gone. If you're risking 3%, 2 accounts have gone. This could potentially happen. Whereas if you are maintaining the same risk, not upping it or reducing it based on how you feel the trade is going to work out, trade the plan, trade the A+ setups. I only trade A+ setups on challenges because why would I go into a trade with higher risk or increased risk based on my normal numbers if I don't have full confidence that the trade could win, or full confidence compared to a B setup that maybe I'll take on a small challenge or one for a YouTube series or something. If I'm going in to pass, A+ setups only, increased risk, that I know I'm comfortable losing the money side of it, and then I'll hopefully pass. So if you have any other tips, maybe from your prop firm experiences, be sure to comment them down below, and I'll catch you guys next time.